just because you're correct doesn't mean you're right. People die when they are killed. When you have a birthday, you celebrate being born. Anime is chock full of unintentionally funny or nonsensical one-liners. To make a point, all these gems come from one goddamned character, namely Shiro, someone please isekai this man, Emiya. So you know there's much more where that came from. Some of these quotes are funny because they're tautological and obvious. Others because of how overly dramatic they are, and others yet because of how nonsensical they sound out of context. But evolution be damned if the Darwin Incident doesn't have one of the stupidest full dialogues I've come across in a while, the sheer scope of which has inspired this video. Without further ado, let's get into it. To get you quickly up to speed if you're not aware, the Darwin Incident is an anime about a human Z, which I was surprised to learn is an actual term recognized by Microsoft Word, who was created when a rogue scientist hybridized his own DNA with that of a female chimpanzee, in order to create Joe Rogan's wet dream of a creature possessing human levels of intelligence paired with a chimp's powerful physiology. The human Z in question was rescued by the eco-terrorist group known as the Animal Liberation Alliance, and was later raised by a pair of loving human foster parents who named him Charlie. Get it? Charlie, Charles Darwin, the Darwin Incident, evolution. Yeah, his name's a borderline pun. 15 years after his rescue, his foster parents finally decide it's time for Charlie to attend high school. Because putting a one-of-a-kind, half-chimp, half-human hybrid capable of ripping a person's limbs off in a building full of hormonal teenagers renowned for their acceptance and tolerance of those different from them is such a great idea. Now, despite my prejudiced fears, when faced with adversity and bullying, which of course he would, Charlie showed himself as level-headed, mature, and rational, putting in place the bully, who is definitely a teenager by the way, in his place by destroying him with facts and logic. At least that's what the scene was supposed to communicate. In reality, it completely fumbles what should have been an easy home run. Let me explain. The incident in question occurred in the school cafeteria as Charlie was eating with his new friend Lucy, whom he had earlier that day rescued from falling off a tree, thus showcasing his vastly superhuman strength and agility. Charlie's heroic feat happened in the middle of the schoolyard and brought quite a lot of attention his way, including that of some of the girls. By the way, most anime suffers from a ton of same-face syndrome, especially when it comes to female designs, but for some reason I found it super noticeable and jarring here. I think it's because the girls don't have crazy anime-esque hairstyles, which usually go a long way in making the same-faceness a bit less obvious. Back on topic, this newfound attention prompts a jealous response from the obviously well-adjusted, definitely teenager Ozzy, who jumps on Charlie for identifying himself as a vegan after he was directly asked by one of the girls. This is where the idiotism ramps up. So, Ozzy, reasonably having taken offense to someone's dietary habits, calls out Charlie on his veganism. Ozzy here equates veganism with progressivism, which he then further equates to the aforementioned eco-terrorist group, who've been responsible for no small amount of property damage. Ozzy's parents own a diner, you see, which may have been targeted by the eco-terrorists in the past, or maybe a potential future target. I haven't watched past the first episode. So he's understandably quite miffed at Charlie here, equating his dietary habits with an affinity for the extremist political ideology of the Animal Liberation Front. Now, the reason this is even dumber than it sounds is because Charlie plainly says he's vegan because his adoptive parents are, and that he's simply never really tried meat. His reasoning is neither ideological nor political in the slightest. Even if the point was to showcase Ozzy as a flawed character whose experiences or upbringing may have made him overly sensitive to a particular topic, this qualification by Charlie makes Ozzy out to be nothing more than a brain-dead bully. We're not done though, not even close. Recognizing his stupidity and belligerence, one of the girls, bless her heart, calls Ozzy out for being worse than a monkey. And in present company, that does seem like a choice thing to say. I mean, Charlie's technically half ape, not half monkey, so I may be the one out of line here, but it still feels a bit, insensitive. Sorry, getting back on track, this comment triggers Ozzy even more, prompting him to pose a philosophical quandary to Charlie, in order to showcase his shallow ethics and hypocrisy, which goes as well as you might expect. Ozzy underlies the following logic. Vegans believe animal lives to be equal to humans, meaning that any discrimination against them would be incompatible with veganism as a philosophy. But what if then there was a mouse carrying a deadly disease that was about to bite our human Z, who in this hypothetical is apparently equipped with a gun, and the only way to stop it was by shooting the diseased mouse dead? Would a vegan such as Charlie really value his own life over a little mouse's and shoot it dead, thus becoming a hypocrite in the process? Before we get to Charlie's answer, let's quickly break down Ozzy's line of reasoning a bit. First, claiming that veganism as a philosophy inherently necessitates the belief that animal lives are equal to human lives is moronic. While I'm sure there are some people who have this belief, in the majority of cases, a vegan would save the life of a fellow person as opposed to that of an animal if given that kind of ultimatum. Most vegans do not believe that animals have the same moral worth as humans, only that their sentience and capacity to experience and suffer makes it immoral to slaughter them for our consumption when plant-based alternatives are present and available. The topic is of course more complex than that, but I'm not here to overthink vegetarianism or veganism, so moving on. Next, this dolt equates veganism with pacifism, i.e. the philosophy of non-violence. While I'm sure there's a solid correlation between people who identify as vegan and those who identify as pacifists, you can absolutely be a vegan with absolutely no qualms with regards to violence in the context of sports or self-defense. Choosing not to consume animal flesh or products does not mean you wouldn't defend yourself if attacked by a wild or rabid animal. Finally, the cherry on top of this moronic hypothetical is the fact that the mouse is carrying a disease which Ozzy never qualified would affect only Charlie. If this mouse was carrying a lethal virus which had even the tiniest chance of spreading from Charlie to infect and kill other people, and Charlie had a way to stop it that didn't entail putting himself in harm's way, such as by shooting it, gunning down that damned rodent wouldn't be a moral virtue at that point, but a moral obligation or necessity. While I know these are philosophically loaded terms, what I'm getting at is the difference between saving a child from a burning building versus saving them from drowning in an inch of water after they've fallen and lost consciousness, for example. As in, no one can be blamed for choosing not to jump in an inferno in order to rescue another's child. But those that do choose to do so should be hailed as heroes of the highest order, i.e. doing so would be morally virtuous of someone. This while choosing to walk past a kid literally drowning in a puddle would absolutely be seen as condemnable by most people, since saving that kid's life would come at no cost or require no effort on behalf of the hypothetical person in question. The shooting a mouse example isn't quite as clear-cut as the puddle example, since you would be hurting another living creature, but considering the arrangement described, I personally think it's close enough. I genuinely have no idea why Ozzy didn't just pick an inherently more dangerous animal like a wolf, thus avoiding the whole virus thing. I'm assuming he wanted to cash in on the perceived defenselessness and cuteness of a mouse because he was mostly surrounded by girls, and wanted to win rhetorical brownie points by painting Charlie as an insensitive monster or something. Truly a high-caliber rhetorician in the making. How does Charlie answer this absolutely cretinous hypothetical? He's got options after all, any of which could serve as a slam dunk in destroying our main man Ozzy here with facts and logic. Instead, the human Z plays it straight and just nonchalantly says he'd indeed shoot the mouse. Alright, fair enough. Charlie here is answering the hypothetical and doesn't want to bully the guy whose IQ obviously doesn't reach room temperature, which is actually much more scathing coming from a European. Ozzy, in turn, compliments Charlie for his honesty, and believing that he has successfully proven him a hypocrite, goes on a tirade about how Charlie is a half-wild animal, the law of the jungle, survival of the fittest, and all that. Only for Charlie to exclaim that if Ozzy was the one carrying the disease, he'd shoot him dead too. Everyone suddenly quiets as Charlie casually takes his lunch and leaves the cafeteria, leaving them all stunned and chilled at the human Z's seeming cold-bloodedness. I'm sorry, but that was such an unnecessarily edgy and dramatic way to end that scene. The point of it was obviously to turn the tables on the ignoramus by reframing Charlie's reasoning as completely consistent, as by claiming he'd shoot Ozzy as well, Charlie makes clear the fact that in his eyes, both the mouse's and Ozzy's lives are equivalent when it comes to protecting Charlie's own. The intention of this scene and the point of Charlie's badass answer is to make it clear that veganism does not necessitate pacifism, as well as affirm the fact that Charlie views his life as having the same value as that of Ozzy's, hence his preparedness to kill him in self-defense. His apparent cold-bloodedness actually stands to affirm his inherent moral value as a person. In theory, this should have made for an amazing comeback and great scene. But the absolute buffoonery and incompetency of Ozzy's assertions and hypothetical really take the wind out of its sails. The scene, for me at least, falls flat on its face. If Ozzy's argument was halfway decent, and it had at least somewhat looked like Charlie found himself in a tough spot, this would have made for an excellent retort, warranting a... But in the context of the argument, it has no punching power. Ozzy started out his line of argumentation by falsely asserting that veganism equals pacifism, which, while a fallacy, could have been excused or could have even worked if Charlie accepted it. But he literally said that he's only a vegan because his adoptive parents are. He just didn't mind. It's a dietary habit, not a philosophy in his case, as far as we know from that exchange. This faulty premise, atop all the other idiotic mistakes Ozzy makes in his hypothetical, turn what really should have been an excellent comeback and put down into an entirely unnecessary and overly dramatic conclusion. It's the equivalent of Vegeta letting out a triumphant roar after putting down Yamcha with Final Flash. The badassery is entirely non-existent, and reaction entirely overkill. And that's that. I know this isn't my usual type of content, i.e. it isn't Hunter x Hunter, but I think it's still on brand for the channel. Speaking of, I don't usually directly ask this, but if you found the video entertaining, please do consider giving it a like, dropping a comment, and so forth, since non-Hunter x Hunter videos tend to do rather poorly on the channel, meaning that any and all engagement is welcome. Also, while I did fixate on Ozzy's moronic hypothetical here, I did overall enjoy the first episode of the anime for the most part. I don't know whether I'll come back to actually finish it though. If any of you have watched past the first episode, I'd appreciate any and all thoughts on whether it's worth the time sink. As usual, I'd very much like to thank the thinkers and overthinkers for going the extra mile in supporting the channel. As always, thank you very much for watching. Your feedback is always appreciated. Subscribe if you'd like more content like this, and I'll see you in the next one.